What is up, YouTube? Welcome to the channel. My name is Ben and I'm a former JP Morgan investment banking analyst. First off, happy Valentine's Day to all of you. Unless you're single like me, then in that case, happy Single Awareness Day. Today, I'm going to be talking about a topic that I'm frequently asked about, and that is the day in the life of an investment banker. Now, if you've asked anyone who's worked anywhere what their normal days are like, of course, they're going to say that it wildly can vary from day to day. So I'm going to give you the best possible examples that I can give you, and I'm going to give you two. One which is a kind of normal / good day, and then one that's a very intense and busy and quote unquote bad day. All right, so let's start off with a good day, and I'll assume that I'm working on a marketing book, which means that we're trying to win business with a client rather than working on a live deal, which I'll get to later on in the video. Okay, so let's say it's 8:30 a.m. I wake up and I quickly check my email. My phone is literally right next to me and I see about 20 emails or so, quickly scroll through them and see that nothing is really needing immediate attention. So I just decide to snooze for another 15 minutes. So luckily I used to live pretty close to the office, so I could get into the office within about a 10-minute walk. And so let's say I get into the office around 9:30 a.m., answer a few emails, figure that there's not really much going on. So at around 10 a.m., I ask my analyst friends to see if anyone wants to grab a breakfast burrito. So we go out and do that. At around 10:30 a.m., I have a call with a client that's potentially looking to IPO. And luckily, as an analyst, there isn't that much that you need to really do on a call besides take notes. So as I listen in on everything, I'm just eating my burrito pretty much in silence. For the next few hours until around 12:30 p.m., I'm working on the marketing book. And for this day, let's say I'm spreading trading comps, which is a valuation methodology in which you're comparing companies' metrics against each other. Basically, what it entails is looking into financial statements, finding the relevant numbers and plugging them into Excel. At first, in the first few months, it was a little bit fun for me. And then once you get to your end of your first year or in your second year, you've just done this so many times, it gets a little bit boring. Once it gets to around 12:30 p.m., since I'm not really in any kind of rush, I grab lunch with a few of my coworkers and bring it back to the desk. Pretty much, there hasn't been a time, I think in around 2.5 years, where I actually had a sit-down lunch at a restaurant. Every single day, pretty much, you just take your lunch back to your office. So I'm working on the trading comps until around 3 p.m. And at that point, I send it out to my associate, who is the one who checks over everything to make sure that everything's 100% accurate. And at this point now, I have a few hours where I don't have really that much work to do on anything else. And so until around, let's say 5 p.m., I'm just checking my NBA fantasy team, trying to see if I should make any trades or something like that. I'm texting my friends to see if they have any weekend plans. And that's pretty much what I'm doing for the next few hours. All right, now at around 5 p.m., my associate says he just wants a few formatting changes. The numbers and all look good. So I make those changes really quickly and then send it out to my managing director and the rest of the full team so they can take a full look at the presentation materials. Now at this point, we're playing a little bit of the waiting game where we're just waiting for our managing director, who's probably around 40 to 50 years old. And he or she has a family and that's the main priority, right? Or maybe he's eating dinner with a client or doing some kind of hobby like golfing or something like that. And we just have to wait until we get those changes. And so I'm just waiting in my cubicle to see and wait for that email to come so that I can finally make those changes and then eventually go home. So let's say it's now 7 p.m. I've already had dinner and I finally get an email from my managing director who says he wants a list of 10 different changes, but they're all relatively quick fixes, so it's not too bad. I make those changes for the next few hours, and by around 9 p.m., I send it off to my associate and VP who are already at home. So then my associate and vice president, they just give me a few more comments, which I make those changes to, and around 10 p.m., I'm finally done. And I just go through the presentation materials one last time to make sure that I'm not making any silly mistakes. And let's say it's around now 10:30 p.m., I send those presentation materials to the full team who will review it tomorrow and make any final changes before sending that presentation eventually to the client. Okay, so now it's around 10:30 p.m. I spend the next 30 minutes or so responding to all the emails that I've kind of been neglecting throughout the entire day. And let's say those are related to recruiting because I'm helping out with the recruiting process. And by 11 p.m., I call my Uber home, get to home at around, let's say 11:15, wash up, maybe watch a show or something, and crash and sleep at around midnight. All right, so next up, let's talk about a bad day. And I'll be assuming that I'm working on a live M&A deal. So a live deal is one in which we've engaged with the client and the client wants to either sell itself or buy another company. It's really intense and all hands are on deck and everyone needs to be on their A game. So the worst start to a bad day in banking is that you've actually had a bad day the previous day. And so you haven't gotten much sleep. So let's say in this particular situation, I've slept at 4 a.m. the day before, and now I'm waking up at 7 a.m. because I'm on the West Coast and our client or maybe our managing director and the rest of our team are on the East Coast. So I wake up to about 50 emails and I slightly panic because my managing director has asked for something 10 minutes ago in advance of our 9 a.m. call with our client. My associate has already responded to my managing director and told him that we're working on it and has already emailed me saying, hey, are you up? And I respond immediately to him and say, yes, I'm working on it. Okay, so then for the next hour or so, I'm just working like a madman on the computer. I booted up my workstation that's just a few feet away from my bed. And as soon as I'm done with the changes, I send it over to my associate, brush my teeth, put on my suit, and pretty much just fast walk to my office. I'm in the office at around 8:30 a.m. and by that point, my associate has sent me a few comments to change. And so I make those changes really quickly and then send it out to the broader team. I have a short breather, let's say for about 5 minutes before our call with the client at 9 a.m. And at this point, the managing director and all of us jump on the call with the client in order to discuss the presentation materials that I've been working on. And let's say that we're working on the beginning stages of an M&A deal. For the next 30 minutes or so, I'm just taking notes and listening in on the call, which is about valuation. And I learned that our client has finished its management model, which is just the financials that we're going to be using to base our valuation materials on. Right after the call at around 9:30 a.m., the client sends us their management model. And for the next few hours, let's say 2 hours or so, my associate and I just go through every single tab in the Excel sheet, trying to understand how the model is built. To give you a little bit of insight, any reputable public company is going to have some sort of internal financial model that it uses to strategize and project where they see the company going over the next, let's say 3 to 5 years, sometimes maybe even 10 years. And these models can be very hairy, unorganized. For a lot of clients, they typically are. There's a lot of like data missing here and there. And so it takes some time to really understand how the model works. For our purposes today, let's say that we just go through it for the next few hours. So at around 11:30 a.m. or so, my associate and I group up in his cubicle and we just discuss any kind of questions we have about the model. And we have a call set up to discuss it with the client at 12 p.m. But in between that time where I think that I'll have 30 minutes off, my managing director emails me saying, hey, can you pull the latest equity research reports on the client? And so I put those together in a nice little PDF for my boss, and then I send that off to him. It's now 12 p.m. My associate and I are on the call with the client, just going through our questions about the model. And my associate is the one pretty much leading the call as an analyst. You maybe have a few questions with the client here and there for something like this, but normally for most calls, analysts are pretty quiet. During the call, my colleague knows that I'm working on a live deal, super busy. So I've messaged him earlier to just get me a salad. Whatever he's getting, I'll get the same thing. And he drops it off during the call. I give him a little nod of thank you and just go back to taking notes. It's now about 1 p.m. My associate and I go into our managing director's office and he's just gonna lay out for us page by page what he wants in the presentation materials. And they can include things like market overviews, trading transaction comps, valuation analysis, accretion dilution analysis, and maybe some appendix pages with some extra research. Throughout all of this, my associate and I are just furiously taking notes because we want to make sure that we don't miss anything. And once the meeting's over, we head to his cubicle again and kind of divide up the work. It's now 2 p.m. I scarfed down the salad that my coworker got me. It's the first thing I've eaten all day. And I'm working on the financial model, building out a discounted cash flow analysis with the management model. And for the next, let's say 4 hours or so, that's pretty much all I'll be working on while my associate creates a shell of the presentation that we're going to be building. So now it's around 6 p.m. I've created a rough shell of what I think the financial model is going to look like. And so I send that off to my associate who's going to be checking it over. And during that time, I do a few things. I jump onto an order for food with my colleagues. And I also am working on the market overview pages and the trading and transaction comps, trying to set that all up so that I'll be ready to do that throughout the rest of the night. At around 8 p.m., my associate gives me the changes to the model that he'd like to see. And over the next 4 hours or so, that's when I'm working on the model, just nonstop, straight, plugging in all the numbers, building out switches to make sure that the model is flexible. And around midnight is when I'm pretty much done with my next draft of the model, and I send that out to the associate. My associate tells me that he'll take another look at the model and knows that it's just a first draft, and so there's probably going to be a lot more work I have to do over the next few days. But he tells me to work on the rest of the presentation. So over the next, let's say 4 hours or so, I'm spreading trading and transaction comps and working on the rest of the presentation. So at this point at around 4 a.m., I'm pretty confident that I'll be able to get a lot of the rest of the materials pretty much finished by the end of the next day. And let's say that the following day after that is when we have the meeting with the client. And so I'm just at this point so tired that I tell my associate, hey, I'm logging off, going home. I'll be back in the office around 8 or 9 a.m. and call an Uber, wash up, just crash in bed at around 4:30 a.m. Okay, so that's an overview of a quote unquote normal day and a bad day in investment banking. Hopefully you found it helpful if you're interested in going into the field or if you're just always curious about it. So like I mentioned earlier on in the video, things change so much day to day, sometimes even hour by hour. And I can tell you that I think the worst day that I had was around 28, 29 hours in a row when all I was doing was just working on a financial model. And there were other days when I would leave at around 6 p.m. after getting into the office around 10 a.m. And sometimes I barely did any work except for just maybe a few hours throughout the day. So it can really vary so wildly in banking. So that pretty much concludes the video. As always, thank you so much for tuning in, and hopefully I catch you next time in the next video. Peace.